The Parah Adumah is the ultimate statute, which even Shlomo Melech, who understood the rational understanding of every statute, but the statute of Parah Adumah, he says, "Rechoki mimenu, rechoki mimeni." It's even beyond me. It's something which I cannot come upon its understanding. And as we discussed yesterday, you're not even permitted to broach it, to approach it, to try to understand it, because Hashem is telling you from get-go, from the beginning, it's something which is not fathomable. Within the human context, it's something which is not understood. Therefore, whatever you're going to come up with, it's incorrect. That's those chukas. This is the ultimate chukah. Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yikchu eilecha Parah Adumah t'mimo. What's v'yikchu eilecha? Rashi says, La'olam hinikres al shmecha Parshas Moshe b'midbar. The Parah Adumah always has relevance to Moshe Rabbeinu. As I mentioned, the Gemara tells us that every Parah Adumah they ever made, it had some of the original ash of the first Parah Adumah that was under Moshe Rabbeinu's instruction. Adumah Timima, Timima Bad Mimus has to be totally red. Saros Shoras Psula. If the red heifer had two black hairs, that would invalidate it. It's not considered completely red. What's Yikwe Lecho? This is something which is personal to Moshe Rabbeinu. We had regarding Shemen Zay Zocht Kosis La'Maor, regarding the oil that was used for the menorah, that was pressed for illumination. Also, it says they should take it for you. We find the same idea. The oil for the menorah, which was illumination, is specifically to Moshe Rabbeinu. They should take it for you. The Parah Adumah Yikwe Lecho. Moshe Rabbeinu has some relevance specifically to the Parah Adumah. We discussed in the past, there's a very fundamental Orach Chaim HaKodesh over here, who asks a question. It says, Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is the ultimate statute of the Torah. Then we begin speaking about the laws of spiritual impurity, that if you come in contact with the dead. If that's the case, it should say, Zos Chukas HaTaro. This is the statute of purification. Although, regarding other laws of spiritual impurity, the mikveh is sufficient. The mayon, the natural wellspring, is sufficient. For this, we need the Parah Adumah. Or should say, Zos Torah Atumah. This is the law of the laws of contamination, that if you're in the same house where you come upon a metal object that came in contact with the dead, it's the equivalent of what? Of the corpse itself. What does it say? Zos Chukas HaTorah. So he explains the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, very fundamental Orach Chaim HaKodesh. And he says this regarding the laws of Nosar, back in Parshas Kedoshim. The laws, he asked the question there, if one eats meat that's not ritually slaughtered, one receives malchus, one receives lashes. But if you eat kosher, if you consecrate an animal, and it has a certain period you eat it, if it reaches its expiration time, if you eat nosa, what's left over, what's the liability? The liability is koris. If the Kohen has an inappropriate, improper thought when he officiates, it becomes pigul. If you eat pigul, the animal that's become putrefied through the inappropriate thought of the Kohen, you eat that meat, you're liable for koris. So he asks, initially this is permitted, and because it's reached its expiration point, it's not permitted, and yet the liability is more extreme than something that initially is not permitted. So he asks why. So he says a fundamental principle that what is the basis for all spiritual contamination? In existence, there are nether forces. It's called kochas Adumah, nether forces. Everything in existence, to exist, has to have a source of sustenance. What sustains everything in existence? The word of Hashem, or something which has to do with Kedusha. Kedusha itself, something that was sanctified, is directly connected to that level of existence. So the more Kedusha something has, the more intense the Kedusha is, the more intense the nether forces will be, attaching themselves to that location of Kedusha. Because by attaching it, it's like a leech. They sap the Kedusha that's contained within that item. So the meat that initially ultimately was qualified for the Mizbeach, now it becomes invalidated, either through being expired or by having the improper thought. This is something that initially had the ultimate level of Kedusha. Now there's a vacuum, there's a void. Because there's a vacuum, all the nether forces immediately attach themselves to that. And as a result of that, it has this overwhelming, intense level of impurity. And therefore, if you ingest it, if you eat it, it destroys your spiritual system. That's koris. That's how Orach Chaim HaKodesh explained it over there. That's why the liability for Nosar or for Pigul, it has this extreme level of liability. He explains, well, the first Pesach we had done was Pesach B'Tzrayim. Before we left Egypt, we did the Korban Pesach. There's no mention that the Jews had to purify themselves before they engaged in the Korban Pesach. Why? So he says, in Egypt, what was our classification? We were B'nai Noach. We were not, our classification, we were not Yisrael. We were not Jews yet. We were the children of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but we didn't have the status of Yisrael. We only assumed the status of Yisrael at Sinai. At Sinai, when Hashem gave us the Torah, we were elevated to a new dimension of existence, and we had another level of capacity of Kedusha due to that connection and relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The soul of the Jew is a different dimension of soul. As a result of that, if a Jew comes in contact with any item which is impure, he becomes contaminated. A non-Jew comes in contact with anything impure, he's totally unaffected. Because the Jew, even when he's alive, he has Kedusha, and because of the Kedusha he has, when he comes in contact with certain impure items, such as the carcass of an animal or a dead rodent, he becomes contaminated. If a non-Jew comes in contact with that, he's not contaminated. Again, because the Jew represents a Kedusha and the impure forces attach themselves to the Jew. What happens when the body vacates the soul? What is the neshama? What is the body? The body is the receptacle for the neshama. Even after the soul leaves the body, the traces of that Kedusha, of that overwhelming intense Kedusha left in the body. As a result of that, when the soul leaves the body, an overwhelming level of nether forces attach themselves to the body to sap and to suck, to be sustained with that ultimate level of Kedusha, which remains with the body. That's the concept. As a result of that, a non-Jew, if you come in contact with his body, even a non-Jew, you become contaminated. But if the remains of the non-Jew is under the same roof, and you went into that room, one doesn't become contaminated. Only a Jew. Odom ki yomas bo'el. If you're an Odom, if your classification is Odom, Atem Kriim Odom, which happened at Sinai due to the Kabbalah Torah, only then did we ascend to that new level dimension of Kedusha. Therefore, the body now is a receptacle for another dimension of soul. Therefore, the overwhelming level of nether forces generate this tumah that not only are you contaminated if you come in contact, but even if you're under the same roof, you become contaminated by the remains of that person. Okay, that's the concept. Therefore, the Torah says like this, Zos chukas haTorah. This statute is directly related to the Torah itself, to the giving of Torah at Sinai, that since the Jew is associated and attached to the Torah, and we became the Odom. Therefore, that's the reason why we have relevance to this intense level of Kedusha, of contamination, because of the Kedusha. And he gives a mashal, he explains it with an allegory, and he says, if you have a pail which is filled with nectar, and you empty the pail, what is attracted to that pail? The pail's out in the field. All kinds of rodents and insects are attracted to that pail because of the sweetness of the nectar and the purity of the nectar. If you have a bucket of manure and you empty it, it will attract that many insects and whatever may be, but it's not going to be as many because the attraction is not as attractive. Because the purity and the sweetness of whatever that is, it's not. The neshama of the Jew is the ultimate level of Kedusha. Therefore, like overwhelmingly, it's attacked by what? By these nether forces. And therefore you become contaminated. The non-Jew doesn't have that dimension. It's literally a lesser realm of, not a lesser level, another realm. And because it's another realm, it does not attract the nether forces, therefore it does not generate this overwhelming level of tumah, of impurity. That's the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. Therefore, Zos Chukas HaTorah. It's only due to the Torah, therefore we were subject to contamination. Therefore, before the Korban Pesach, we had the story, these people were contaminated, and that the Pesach Sheni was introduced due to that predicament that these two people were contaminated. In Mitzrayim, we had no relevance to the contamination. Because our classification was not Yisrael, we were Bnei Noach. As Chaim Volozhin explains, that even the greatest angel is not able to fathom the makeup of the Jewish soul. Not able. Because the Jewish soul, it emanates from under whatever this means, from under the Kisei HaKavod. Its source of origin is from under the heavenly throne of Hashem. That's Nishmas Yisrael. The greatest angel was created from a lower level, a lower echelon. Therefore, the angel can't fathom something which comes from a higher level. And therefore we say, the Gemara tells us, Yisrael v'Oraisa v'Kutshibrichu Chatu. The Torah is God's wisdom. And they have the Torah, Yisrael v'Oraisa, Yisrael and the Torah, Aramaic, Oraisa is the Torah, the Kutshibrichu and the Holy One are all one. Chadu. We're all intermeshed. That's the dimension of the Jewish soul and the Torah that allows us to cleave, to attach ourselves to Hashem himself. That's the mitzvah of Botidbok. We attach ourselves. There's possible we should attach ourselves to Hashem. Now, there's a pasuk, the Gemara quotes a pasuk in Eov, in Job, that the Torah is infinite. The wisdom of God is infinite. Okay? Now, if the Torah is infinite, even though Shlomo Melech was Chochem Mikol Adam, he was the wisest man ever lived, as much as he understood of Torah, he was not able to fathom the Torah in its entirety. Because something that's finite doesn't have the capacity to come upon the infinite. The soul of the Jew assumed this new dimension because we were infused with Torah. So the neshama of the Jew is directly connected to the reality of how the Torah affected it. When we became Odom, the potential of the Jew is unlimited. It has relevance to the infinite. It's not infinite, but it has relevance to the infinite. The Ramchal writes that even though a Jew is finite, but we have relevance to the infinite, because he explains that if you take something, a branch, and you graft it onto a tree, and you graft it correctly, eventually the ecology of the branch assumes the ecology of the tree itself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, although you're finite, but you're able to attach yourself to me, And as a result of that, you become part of an infinite system. Now, how do you become part of that infinite system? How do you do the grafting? How do you do ubot tidbok? How do you cleave to me? Through the Torah, through Talmidei Chachamim. So once you cleave to the infinite, you assume an infinite status. The Parah Adumah, that it generates that level of Kedusha, that it has this overwhelming level of nether force, it's directly connected to the Jewish soul, its association with Hashem. Therefore, even Shlomo Melech, who is Chacham Mikol Adam, he said, Rechoki Mimeni. Every other statute, I'm able to come upon its essence, upon its truth. The Parah Adumah, how it exactly deals with this contamination, how it relieves it, how it addresses these nether forces, which is directly connected to the makeup of this Jewish soul, which allows itself to attach to Hashem, which is infinite. That's something he says, Rechokim Mimeni. That's the reason why it was beyond him. Even he was not able to grasp that, to come upon its truth for that reason. Why did the Moshe Rabbeinu have difficulty making the menorah? And Hashem said to take a block of gold, just put it in the fire. Right? Why? What was the difficulty? So we explained then, it wasn't the physical form of the menorah. That every vessel of the Mishkan, or every component of Mishkan, had to be infused with a certain intent, with a certain kavanah. And it says, why Betzalel, why did he oversee the Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan? Because he was infused with divine inspiration. And the Gemara says he understood the conjugation of letters which brought about creation. That means every part of the Mishkan had to be infused with an intent to be able to activate forces which would bring about the result which was meant to be brought about. The menorah, as we explained, what does the menorah represent? Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh represents the infinite. So to infuse it with the intent, with the kavanah, to activate the infinite, the only one who could infuse the menorah with that in kavanah is only Hashem himself, only God himself. So he told him, take the block of gold, put it in. That act you do. But now it comes out the menorah. The menorah that came out of the fire was a menorah which was infused with Hashem's intent, that now that menorah, when you light it, it activates the force to come upon the truth of Torah. Again, because Torah is the infinite. So when we study Torah, although we don't understand infinite, but innately in the Torah contained is the infinite.
Rabbi?
Yes, Alan.
I'm sorry, just slightly off topic, but Jay brought up his...
So Rashi is classified by the Miri. The Miri is one of the early commentators on Shas. He refers to Rashi as Gedolei HaMeforshim. He's the greatest commentator. There's no commentator like Rashi. When he refers to Rambam, who's a codifier, he says Gedolei HaMechabrim. He's Gedolei HaMechabrim. That's his classification of Rashi and the Rambam. Without Rashi's commentary on Torah, whether it's Chumash, Navi, Gemara, whatever it is, it would be impossible to understand the Torah itself. You have Tosas, you have other Rishonim, but literally every word of the Shas, Rashi's commentary, without it, even if we'll understand to some degree, we'd be missing most of it. So we're only able to come upon the truth of Torah with Rashi's commentary. Now, you realize, you start learning Chumash and Rashi, a child starts learning Chumash and Rashi in 4th, 5th grade, whatever age he is. That child is able to call a level of understanding from Rashi to understand what the Torah is saying. You have a person who's a well-weathered Talmid Chacham. He studies that same Rashi. He understands in Rashi, quotes from that Rashi, something the child cannot. You have the Godel Ador, the greatest Torah sage of the generation, studying the Rashi. He sees other things in Rashi that the ordinary Talmid Chacham does not see. The Ramban, Nachmanides, who was a Risha, when he studied Rashi, the same Rashi, he understood Rashi at another level. So Rashi, it's unbelievable. He wrote a commentary that whatever level you were at, you're able to call some level of understanding that at your point of entry, you're able to come upon to appreciate the Torah at a certain level, whether it's the child, whether it's the adolescent, whether it's already the mature Talmud Chacham, whether it's the advanced Talmud Chacham, whether you're the Vilna Gaon or the Ramban or the Rambam, they all studied Rashi, these people. And every one of them saw other things in Rashi deeper and deeper. So it's interesting. It reflects really what the Torah is. It reflects the Torah, that as much as you delve and you address it, it's almost unlimited. The Miri writes about Rashi, not the Miri, the Rosh Rabbeinu Osher writes on Rashi that every question which the Rishonim ask on Rashi is very concise in his commentary. And his wordage, there's not even an extra word on Rashi. Every word was written with a specific intent. Even the Rishonim, if they would have understood what Rashi, the choice of words or his phraseology they used, they would never have a question on Rashi. So even they who at this very advanced level did not come upon the full understanding of what Rashi was writing. And as a result of that, that's why they had the questions. That's what the Rosh writes about Rashi's commentary on Shas, on the Torah itself. But it reflects this concept that it's almost endless. At one level, as much as you delve in it, you keep coming upon new horizons, understanding what Rashi understood when he's trying to communicate what lies in the Torah itself. Well, Niskadno Adoros. Niskadno Adoros means that the further we distance ourselves from Sinai, our dimension of soul is a lesser dimension. And therefore, our capacity of understanding truth is a different level. We don't understand the way they understood it. So the people who lived before Rashi, they were people like the Rambam. The Rambam, his so-called forte was he was a codifier. But he learned Shas, he learned the Torah the way Rashi learned. He may have had a different understanding. They're both Eluv and Divrei Klim Chaim. They're both truth. But it doesn't mean saying Rambam understood less than Rashi. Even Rambam. It's interesting. If you study Reb Chaim Brisker on the Rambam, he goes and he does analysis on Rambam, and literally he shows you that one word doesn't read into the next word. And every word of Rambam is written with a specific intent. And after Reb Chaim gives you an understanding of Rambam, you don't understand what the original question was. That's how flawless and seamlessly Rashi, the Rambam reads. That was the greatness of Reb Chaim Brisker. Before, you couldn't make heads or tails out of Rambam, and afterwards, it was difficult to understand what the original question was. That's how clear the Rambam is, what he actually is saying. As they say, I see, said the blind man. I see, said the blind man. All of a sudden, you come on a new level of understanding, you have difficulty. It was never a question. It's like sometimes people ask me a question. I said, something, I'm not going to give you an answer. I'm going to show you why a question is not a question. It's that kind of understanding. It's not a question. So the people who lived before Rashi, they were a dimension of greatness, the Gaonim. The Gaonim were before the Rishonim, or Rashi's Rebbe. They were great people. But of course, they were all within that era of Rishonim, and some of them maybe had certain abilities that the other ones did not have.
So
there was a person, we have 1 minute to go. His name was Rishu ben Chananya. He was as ugly as sin. And the daughter of the emperor said to him, how was such beautiful wisdom contained in such an ugly vessel? And he was an advisor to her father, to the emperor. So he said to her, tell your father, tell the wine steward to transfer all the wine from the earthen casks into gold and silver casks. Within 3 days, all the wine soured. And the emperor asked for wine, and the wine steward said it all soured. She says, what happened? So he told her, his daughter said they should transfer from the earthen casks to the gold and silver casks. And the Gemara says that Torah is compared to wine. It's one of the liquids it's compared to, wine. So now, when you put wine in an earthen cask, what does the cask do? It absorbs. It has no properties of its own. So therefore, the wine retains its pristine purity, it's pure wine. When you allow the wine to sit in gold or silver casks, the properties of the gold eventually intermingle with the wine. That causes the wine to sour. It spoils the wine. So he said, a person who's truly humble, he's looking for one thing. What is God saying? As a result of that, the less of an ego you have, the greater chance you have coming upon the truth of Torah. Because I'm not interested in I'm not interested in putting my spin on the Torah. I'm trying to understand what God is saying. Therefore, the Torah is able to retain its purity. But if a person has an ego and he wants to show who he is, he allows his own ego to intermingle with the Torah, so it comes out it's not absolute truth, or it's not truth at all. So therefore he said, so she asked him, but you find other people who are more handsome than you are not ugly, they come upon the truth of Torah. He says, if they be uglier, they come upon greater levels of truth. That's what he responded. So Jay, got to work on it. You're too handsome. Okay. We're going to do the halacha.
Can you just repeat what the Neri said, the name? Gedole for what? What was the second word?
Gedole HaMechabrim is the Rambam. Gedole HaMeforshim. The greatest of the commentators is Rashi. Okay. We left off Chavches, page 163. Mishi Yeshlo Makas Bepisas Raglo. Person has some kind of wound on the sole of his foot. The kosher aleh matbeo lahogen shlo yinogev beraglo. So he puts a coin on the wound, so when he walks, the wound shouldn't be opened to protect the wound. So the metal of the coin does two things. It protects the wound, not to open, and also the metal has a healing power. It heals the wound. You're permitted to go out with it. And to speak where he secured it onto his foot, onto the sole of his foot. Let's see, Mr. Baruchov. Ches gamu merape, humi loshen atur. Umashvi said the dov she'ena merape. But it seems to be if the coin doesn't have that therapeutic property or that healing property, but it's only to protect it that the wound shouldn't open. That's not enough reason that you'd be permitted to go out with that coin attached to protect the wound. That even if it doesn't have that healing, but the coin is put there to protect the person, that he should be in less pain. It protects the wound. And Kostos, Shabbos of Shem, Moreno, Harav, Rabbeinu Shmuel, Kundver, Ayin, Leos, Habez, Shemagro, Didasa Ramu, Gamkin Hochi, Kenim Chotach, Etzba B'Shabbos. Okay, person that cut himself. The Korech Hatich has beggar Oleshli Yisartiv Godov. He put on a band-aid, same equivalent of a band-aid. Why permitted to wear a band-aid? The band-aid doesn't heal, it just protects the wound, then it shouldn't be irritated. Or it shouldn't open up. Therefore, there's no question. He says, you cut your hand, you put a piece of cloth, wrap it around the wound to protect it. It's permitted. Muter, lots of miu, Yosef Shichroch, Alamokam Azer, Bezos Smartut. But it's better than, rather than using a piece of cloth, you should take a rag. Smartut is a rag. Why? He says, if you take a garment and you put a garment has an identity. We'll see later, if a person wears a garment, not the way it's normally worn, that's considered, it may be it's transporting, but it's unconventional transporting. if you take a piece of cloth which has no value, it's a rag, and you wrap it around the wound, because it has no value unto itself, and its value is only to protect the wound, it's subsumed by the person's identity. It loses, it's no longer a rag. Since it's accommodating the body, therefore he's not transporting anything. But let's say you take a handkerchief and you wrap the handkerchief around that wound. A handkerchief has other functions. So you're wearing a handkerchief on the wound. So what are you doing? You're transporting a handkerchief unconventionally, because that's not normally the way you transport a handkerchief. As a result of that, there's a question there, are you transporting or not transporting? So he says, if you're going to put something on the wound, it should be something that has no value. So as a result, its only value is its function now, and as a result of that, it has no identity whatsoever. He says everybody would be agreeable there. He says something interesting, but he has to make sure to wash off the blood before he puts that rag on, because the halacha is rabbinically, you're not permitted to dye anything on Shabbos. Dyeing. So if the cloth now is absorbed with blood, you're dyeing the what? You're dyeing the cloth. And rabbinically, even though it's makalkel, it's not something which is enhancing, but since it has a semblance of dyeing, make sure he says to wash off the blood before you put the rag or the garment on the wound, because otherwise we're touching upon dying. You're dying.
Rabbi, aren't you laundering if you wash off the blood from the handkerchief?
Blood, no, not from the rag. The blood on your finger.
Oh, on the wound, I see. Okay.
On the wound. First, rinse off the blood from the wound, and then put on the cloth, or then put on the Band-Aid. Okay? So if you put on a gauze bandage, which its function is to put on the wound, it's never a question, because its value is that. But if you take a garment and you put it on there, which the garment has other functions and other identities, putting it on that, it doesn't lose its identity. Therefore, we get involved in this question over here. Does it also have to heal? Does it not have to heal? So when we speak about you put on a Band-Aid, a bandage or whatever it is, it's never a question. But sometimes a person cuts himself on Shabbos and you take a handkerchief, you wrap it around and you wear it home. La alocha, it's permitted. Because most agree it doesn't have to heal. As long as it protects it, it's enough. But he says not to get involved in this question. If you take something which has no value other than its function to protect the wound, then everybody agrees you're permitted. Mutolot says, the pieces raglo mebojo. Beza smartut. It's thing where you attach that coin before Shabbos to the sole of your heel, to the sole of your foot. Lo choshev bottle. Avum kosher os bedover shu choshev. Also lotzis b'Shabbos. Yeah. Okay. Let's see Chavtes. Hayotzi betalis. This is Gemara in Shabbos. People go to shul and they don't have talis in shul and they want to wear their own talis. So what do? They wear a coat and they put the talis on under the coat, and the coat covers the talis. But very often when they wear the talis, and even people in shul, when they wear talis, they wear it like a shawl. A shawl meaning basically bunched up on their shoulders. It doesn't drape down, cover the majority of the back. The Gemara says that if you wear a garment and doesn't cover the majority of your back, that's not called wearing a garment. That's not the appropriate way to wear a garment. Therefore, if you go into Rosh Hashanah wearing a garment in that manner, it's considered carrying. You're not in violation maybe on a Torah level because it's unconventional carrying, but that's called, you're not wearing the garment as a garment's normally worn, because a talis, a shawl, which is a talis, it's supposed to drape down the back, the majority of the back, your back. So if you bunch it up on your shoulders, and basically it's like on your shoulders and around your neck, that's called carrying. Whether it's the right drabana, but it's not wearing. Okay, so that's what he's speaking about over here. Hayotzim talis mukupeles al ksefov. The hainu After he wraps himself in talis, he lifts the hem and bunches it up on his shoulder. That's the way he's wearing it. Chayiv chatos. That's called yichayv chatos, meaning that's called conventional carrying. But he says if the talis is draping down and it goes beneath his shoulders, like goes down to the shoulder blades, shori, since after he wraps himself, and now the talis is covering his shoulder and his body, because it's draping down his back, although it doesn't fully hang down all the way to what normal is. Let's say you don't want it to hang beyond your coat. You're wearing a short jacket, and you want to wear it under your suit jacket. It's okay. As long as the talis is covering part of your back, you're okay. Because if you wear it fully extended, it would go beyond the bottom of your jacket. Therefore, you're permitted to put the talis under your shirt. So even time in the Mechaber, they would wear the talis to shul. Very often you go to Yerushalayim or in Israel, you see it, that people, when they go to the Netzminyan, you go to the Kosel or you go to a Netzmin in Israel, many people, they arrive in shul wearing the talis and tefillin. And in the winter, they have it under the coats. And all you can see, they have it, they don't wear a hat, they have the talis over their heads, but the talis is covered with their coat. So the Mechaber says, if it's under your shirt or your outer garment, he says, and that's where you bring it to shul, it's okay, because that's called wearing, because it's not only is it on your shoulder, it's draped down, covering part of your back.
Even though a person's intention is to wear that talis only in shul, he has no intention to use it as a garment to go to shul. He's wearing it to get it to shul.
Let me ask you a question. A person needs a jacket in shul, and you wear two jackets, right? And your intent is to bring the jacket to somebody in shul, but you're going to wear it to shul, to give to him. Are you permitted to wear that extra jacket? You're permitted. Because you're wearing it. Doesn't make a difference. As long as you're wearing something, it's around what your intent is. We're talking about transporting. It's not transporting because what you bring into shul, you're wearing, you're not transporting. And since you're doing it for Shabbos, it's not called preparation. If you want it there because you need it after Shabbos, that's a question of achvana. You're not permitted to do anything on Shabbos to prepare for after Shabbos. But if it's a Shabbos to accommodate somebody there, it's not a problem.
So wearing a handkerchief around your neck, then you're wearing it as a garment. Let's call it
Let's say a scarf,
or a scarf. But handkerchief really.
Mishnah Berurah spoke about a case. You take a handkerchief and you knot a few of them together and use it as long as you don't have a belt in the loop, and it serves as to secure your pants. That's called the garment. If you have a belt, put it through. One doesn't wear two belts. So therefore, the second belt you put in, that's called transporting.
But one doesn't wear two jackets either, Rabbi.
Because that's warmth. If it's cold, people put on more than one garment, even the same garment. They put on put on layers.
So if it's 90 degrees outside and guys wearing two jackets,
as long as it's worn any time, that's called wearing. That's called wearing. You want to wear a fur coat when it's 120 degrees outside, right? It's not a problem because that's called you're wearing the coat. You're not carrying the coat. The Gemara says if the person wears tefillin on Shabbos in Rosh Hashanah, although it's a Torah violation, you're not permitted to wear tefillin because of Baal Tosef. But if you wear tefillin from private domain, public domain, you're not in violation of carrying. That since tefillin are worn during the week, so the manner in which you're transporting it is called wearing. It's not called transporting. So similarly, a garment that although it's not worn now due to the climate, but since there are times where it is worn, Although it's not now due to the temperature, that's called wearing, that's not called transporting.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question on Chana?
I prefer to stay away from Achana now.
Okay, no, because it was wearing, if you wear a raincoat to shul, and now it's not, by the way home, it's sunny. Now, when you bring it home, do you mean you have to wear it at some point during the day?
No, you can wear it home. You can wear it home.
No, you don't want to wear it home. It's too hot now. It's just
To
the
wear it.
opposite weather. Do you want to?
What's the difference? Yes, are you allowed to wear it home because you don't want to leave it in shul?
Yeah, and there was the Chana. I'm just saying, like you
You can wear it home. But this always comes up, you have your talis in shul.
right,
Shul it ends, and you want to, and you have an Arab in the community. You want to carry your talis home from
right,
shul.
exactly,
So
exactly,
you're permitted. Seemingly, it's a chana.
right,
Preparing because you don't want to go back after Shabbos to bring your talis home.
right.
There,
You are not permitted.
I was once in Englewood. It may have been Alan's one of his bar mitzvahs, and I had my talis there. After Shabbos, many of the talisim, I couldn't find my talis until finally Alan located the talis. So if you leave it, you take it home because you're concerned it may be misplaced, and your Shabbos is disrupted due to not knowing what's going to happen to your talis, that's not preparing for the weekday. That's for Shabbos, you're permitted to take it back.
No, I'm sorry, but otherwise, the Rav said that you cannot take it back if you just want to get it home.
What's
an Erev?
What's the heter to take it? You're preparing. You're doing something now. She shouldn't have to go back after Shabbos to bring home the talis.
Well, you don't leave a person doesn't leave his talis in shul.
If you're concerned, it's going to disappear.
Not about concern. I take it home.
Okay, why are you taking it home?
Because I don't leave my talis in shul.
Why don't you leave it there? Go back after
Okay.
Shabbos and bring it home after Shabbos. The answer is because you don't want to go back after Shabbos to bring it home. So you're doing something now to accommodate yourself that you don't have to be busy after Shabbos to bring it home. That's called preparation. Using Shabbos to prepare for something that you don't want to do during the weekday. Okay. Sichov Tes. Okay, we're going to see the Shari Tshuva. $382. V'shochad lo tikoch. You're not permitted to take bribery. We're talking about a judge. And the question is, what is taking bribery? A judge has to be impartial. So there's no question. You give him a gift and you ingratiate yourself with the judge, there's no question. He's not qualified. He's disqualified. He cannot adjudicate that case. What about in the past you've done him favors and you have a relationship? That judge understands because of the nature of relationship, you're biased immediately. There's a bias here. It's a problem. It's not so simple. It's very interesting. You meet two people. Now, some people, they have like an attractive, very nice personality. Other people, first time you meet them, it's just their personality is not your kind of person. It's not your cup of tea. So you have two people coming before you to adjudicate a case. And you look at both of them. One to you somehow touches you positively, and the other person touches negatively. Nothing. Now you have to adjudicate between these two people. It's not so simple.
Right.
But since from the very beginning you already have a certain negative feeling, or not positive feeling about one, and the other more than the other, if you feel that in any way that may touch you, which may have a bearing on your decision, you have to disqualify yourself. You cannot rule on that case. And that's why in the old, even today, the certain dayanim, they will cover their face. They will not look at the defendants, will not look at them. Because by looking at them, automatically, You have a sense of them, and you don't want to have any sense. They come before you, you don't know who's innocent, who's guilty, you can hear the case. But sometimes even the voice sometimes touches you in a way where also it can be positive and negative. Person has a certain sweetness comes across, the other person is a caustic type personality. But even the verbiage he speaks differently. If you feel you're touched by it, you have to disqualify yourself. But here we're talking shochad or sikach. Negative commandment. Afilu amanas lezakos is zaken l'chayv sechayev. This is Rashi cites this in Chumash, quotes the Gemara. Before you give the verdict, and you already see clearly one's innocent, one's guilty, and the innocent party wants to give you a gift, you can't take it. Because the moment until you give that verdict, you never know exactly what is needed to find the person innocent or guilty. There may be a nuance of something, you may see it differently. Now, because you took the gift or the bribe, you're not going to see it. There's a famous question which Tosas asked in Baba Basra. There's a certain ruling, it's called Shuda Dedaini. It's something which it's impossible to, it's not based on information, it's referred to as the flip of a coin. It's the discretion of the judge, whatever he wants to rule, he can rule for Reuven, he can rule for Shimon. Because it's something which it's not based on fact. It's up to the judge to rule as he chooses to rule. So Tosas asks, if that's the case, if it's not based on any evaluation of who's more right, wrong, if that's the case, well, in that case, what can't the judge take? Take a gift. The one who wants to, that the judge should give him a favorable ruling, he should give a gift. It's worth his while. That's Tosas' question. So Tosas answers, to be able to give the ruling, well, Koshu did the dining, this kind of ruling, your classification has to be a dayan. You have to be a judge. A judge who takes bribery is not a judge. It's a halachic ruling. The only one who's qualified to give that ruling is you have to be a judge. The moment you take the bribe, although the basis for the decision is not based on any rational who's right and wrong, the moment you take that bribe, the Torah says you're not a judge anymore. A judge who takes bribery is not a dayan. If that's the case, you're not qualified to give this kind of ruling. That's Tosas' answer in Baba Basra. Let's see the Gemara.
I mean, that would seem to be the epitome of what not to do, because now it can go either way. So the slightest thing that would bias you.
No, the basis for the decision is not based on any who's more right, who's wrong. It's the discretion of what he does, whatever he wants. It's the flip of a coin. He tells one coin per se heads, the other guy says tails. That's it.
Yeah. So if that gift in that scenario,
that is the scenario. That is the scenario.
So of course it's going to sway the judge, because it's going to go either way.
There's no swaying. The whole thing is because he's going to give an improper ruling because of his bias. There's no bias over here. Okay, we'll discuss it when I get to Baba Basra, and that Omud will see Tosas.
Rabbi, the whole concept of a judge not looking or shielding his face from someone giving testimony is troubling to me, and I'll tell you why. Because the idea of credibility of a witness, how much do I believe this person? How credible is this person? Can only be assessed by a careful observation of the person. Just because you hear a voice on the radio doesn't tell you exactly the same as if
it's not a voice on the radio. A voice it's a replicated voice. You hear the voice.
All right. I mean, today's technology, it's almost identical. My point is that there's the visual and the way the person is conducting themselves, whether they fidget, how comfortable they are, how the voice sounds, all of these things are clues to what the truth is. And if you close your eyes to that, you're closing your eyes to very important information.
Okay.
I understand the concept of saying I don't want to be, but
I'm asking you.
That's why a judge is a judge. He's got to.
Very often a person, a person may not read the person correctly. He comes in and he looks like you profile him.
But
And the way you profile him, he's not.
But that's the job of a judge.
Yeah, I understand. See, let me tell you the difference between when I first came to New York, I learned with the person he was a lawyer and everything else. I said, Torah itself has to meet certain criteria. So if there's a judge and there's a beis din, there's a rabbinic court, and they give a judgment, unless it meets all the criteria what the Torah says, the judgment is not truthful. It has to meet that criteria. So he said to me, in secular law, they do their best. We try to get as close as we can't come to the truth. Because sometimes it's a known fact that if the judge gets up on the wrong side of the bed because he had an argument with his wife, you don't want to go before the judge on that day. You don't want. You tell me, well, if you're a Supreme Court judge, you're another level. But talk about a person in the lower court. You don't want to go before that judge. Or if that judge has a bias, he doesn't like Jews. He's a semi-anti-Semite. He has a bias. Or he whatever it is. He's of a certain elite class, and anybody of lesser class, he doesn't value their lives or whatever it is, and he doesn't give it the attention he should. There's so many variables to be able to come upon truth. And one of the variables is some people, they just rub you the wrong way. You don't even know them. It's not your kind of personality. And if it's not your kind of personality and it touches you badly, you can't, that's just the reality.
I understand all of that, but that's
so good. So the answer is in secular law, it's not a problem because we try to get as close as we can to the truth. We can't it's not perfect. And everybody agrees on it, but Torah has to be perfect. And if it can't be perfect, then you have to disqualify yourself.
I'm not buying it because a judge has a job to do no matter how he gets up in the morning. And he sometimes doesn't even know if he's biased, but he's got to just do the best he can.
Yeah, I think, Rabbi, what David
Mayor Koch once wrote a book, I'm not going to mention, and he wrote in his book about a certain New York State Supreme Court judge, and he literally spoke about this judge in the most demeaning way. He says 90% of his rulings were reversed. That's how unacceptable his rulings were. Could you imagine? To have 90% of your rulings, and it was true. It was. Because this guy was a bleeding heart liberal, and he fell for every person. And the ruling, his judgment was based upon his feelings. That's what it was, his compassion. But there were many problems with his rulings. They reversed 90% of his rulings. And he made a mockery of this particular person.
I don't think that's the gist of what David's trying to say.
No, I understand it's not. I'm just giving you an extreme example of that.
I think the point is that not looking at a witness, there's a lot of signals that you can get from either body language, eye movement, and things of that nature, which are part of the human interpretation of communication. And to blind yourself to that is, on the one hand, advantaging you potentially by attempting to maintain your neutrality, but on the other hand, you're leaving clues that you might discern on the table, not to be discerned.
I hear. The Sanhedrin definitely looked at the people. I'm saying that a person who feels that by seeing the person may affect his evaluation of that person, and he'll have a bias because of the information he's going to hear, then it becomes a problem. For that person, he has a problem. You know, certain people are very opinionated, and they're very, they classify people. They're not all embracing. That kind of person is not so simple. You want to come before that person, because if you don't meet his kind of profile, you're starting off on the left foot with him. That's the point. I'm not saying you have to cover your face, but a person that has an issue with this, it's better maybe not, or just disqualify yourself. You shouldn't be in the business. You shouldn't be in a position to be a judge for that reason.
Okay.
I would go one step further and say that any judge who does not look at the witnesses should be disqualified from being a judge.
Okay. If he feels that it would affect him to that degree, maybe he should be. You know, it's interesting. For Moshe Feinstein, you read about him. I mean, he was a genius beyond genius, but not only was a genius beyond genius, and there's nothing he didn't know, but a sensitivity to people and the way he read people, it's not to believe the way he was able to assess a person, besides his knowledge. And there was a story that it was ready after candle lighting, and a woman came and rang his doorbell after candle lighting, and after she lit candles. She was a observant woman, but didn't know much. And she rang, it wasn't an electric doorbell, it was just a chime doorbell. And he opens the door and he doesn't look at her. And he asks her, why did you ring the doorbell? If you already lit candles, you shouldn't have rung the doorbell. He did not look at her. So afterwards, and he made it obvious that he wasn't looking at her, to the woman. He said, it's insulting. You know, you speak to her, you look at him, wouldn't look at her. She'd say maybe because he was upset. So afterwards, they asked him, why did you look at the woman? He said, you know why I didn't look at her? Because if she would see that I saw who she was, and now I meet her on the street, he greeted everybody in the street when he walked down the street. And she knows that I know who she was. Every time she would see me, she'd feel embarrassed. So she'd always avoid me. So I prefer not to look at her. She knows I don't know who she was. So when I see her on the street, I'll greet her like I'll greet everyone else. That was Moshe Feinstein. Okay. Okay, let's go further. We were speaking yesterday about Makas Medina, that if it's the plight of the region, so even though you committed to deliver so many bushels per year, you're not bound to that commitment. So we had an argument, what exactly is Makas Medina? Does it mean that whole area was affected by blight or by windstorms or whatever it is? Or no, that even if you have one field which is surrounded with 4 other fields, if all the fields that surround that one field were affected by locust or by blight or whatever it is, the person of the middle field that's encircled by that doesn't have to pay. He doesn't have to pay what originally he was committed to. That's Makas Medina. So we gave various scenarios. And the other one said that even if it's one row of growth around the field, the surrounding fields weren't affected by locusts. Just the row of produce that surrounded the field, that's also Makas Medina. Because it's not only his field, even the surrounding rows, although the fields weren't totally destroyed, that's Makas Medina, okay? So we had various scenarios. We're holding over here on Daf Kuvav, the 4th line. Omalei Zara Chiti. The landowner says to the person who rented the field, we said he was going to deliver so many bushels of wheat. That was the payment for the year. He says, I want you to plant it. You should plant wheat. Vozel Zara Saori. And rather than planting wheat, he planted it with barley. Ishtaduf. Rubi de Baga. And then the majority of that area the crop was destroyed by windstorm. Vishtadif nami hani sorry. Delay. Yeah. So all the fields in that location were destroyed, and his field was also destroyed, except he planted it barley rather than wheat. We say all the other fields surrounded were planted with barley, and they were destroyed, your field was destroyed. And you'd say, just as if it would have been wheat, it would have been destroyed, as it's destroyed today, barley. So therefore, he has no claim against the tenant farmer at all. Odilma, if you would have followed my instructions and planted wheat, that I would have decreed, and it would have come out the way you would have wanted. Meaning, even though the others were affected negatively, sometimes Hashem meets the request of a person, and the wheat wouldn't have been destroyed. So since over here you did not follow an instruction and you planted barley, barley was destroyed because that's not what I wanted. But if you would have planted wheat, it was only decreed the barley crop should be destroyed, not the wheat crop. Okay? So what do? Does he pin the blame on the tenant farmer and he has to meet his obligation? Or do we say, no, it's the hard luck of what? Of the landowner. And he doesn't have to meet the obligation. On that, the Gemara answers, Mistavro, the Omale, Izarat Chiti, have him Kaim Bi, Batigzor, Omaloch. V'yokem loch al drochecho noga orim. He's just quoting the full pasuk. It's logical to say that the landowner could say that since I wanted wheat, Hashem would have issued the decree that the wheat should not be destroyed. Therefore, the tenant farmer has to meet his obligation to pay the whatever bushels he was meant to give of wheat.
Right, but even though in all the fields around the whole area there, the wheat and barley was
No. The fields around were barley, not wheat.
Let's say they were wheat and barley, and they were all destroyed.
No, then he doesn't.
And this doesn't apply.
Doesn't apply.
Even though he wanted wheat, he planted barley.
The Shtadvu Kol Sadozov Shal Machkir. What about the owner, the landowner? He had fields elsewhere, and all his fields were destroyed. The Shtadv Nami Chobadayu. And this field of this tenant farmer was destroyed. The Shtadv Ruba de Baga, meaning where the field was located, it was destroyed. That field was destroyed. The surrounding fields were not destroyed, but all the fields of the landowner, we had fields elsewhere, were destroyed. So you say, this landowner, he has bad luck. Because if all his fields are destroyed, and this field in this location is destroyed, although the surrounding field wasn't destroyed, what does it say? It's not because of the bad luck of the tenant farmer, it's the bad luck of the landowner. Because you see, all his fields were destroyed. Do we say that since the fields in that region, in that location, were not destroyed, the tenant farmer cannot deduct from his obligation? Or maybe we say, since all the properties of the landowner were all destroyed, this is on your dime, so to say. It's because of your measure. It's your hard luck. What's proof of the pudding? Because all your fields were destroyed. So what do we say? We say since the fields here were not destroyed and only this field was destroyed, it's the tenant farmer's bad luck? Or we say no, that since all the fields of the landowner were destroyed elsewhere, we attribute this field here to be destroyed not due to the tenant farmer, but due to the landowner. That's the shayla. That's the question. Mistavro. So the Gemara says it's logical to say he says if it would have been my hard luck, my bad luck, the landowner, Hashem would have had rachmanis and left over a remnant. Would have left over a remnant. Meaning this is after the Churban Bayis Rishon, after the destruction of the first temple. And this is after Gedalia ben Achikim. We have a fast right after Rosh Hashanah. It's called Tzom Gedalia. The Babylonians allowed the Gedalia to be the governor over the Jewish community. And then he was assassinated. When he was assassinated, the Jews really had very difficult times. So they said, Hashem left us a remnant of although everything was taken away, Hashem, due to his Rahmanis, leaves over a remnant. So he says, although all my other fields were destroyed, but Hashem would leave me a remnant. So therefore, we say it's the luck of the tenant farmer, not the bad luck of the owner. It's not so simple. Right? You hear what he's saying? All the landowners' fields were destroyed. This field was also destroyed. All the fields surrounding were not destroyed. Do we say it's the hard luck of the landowner, or it's the hard luck of the tenant farmer? So it says that since it says in the Pasuk, I will leave you a remnant. Therefore, we pin it on the tenant farmer, not on the landowner. So what's obviously the question?
Well, we just had before. By the way, the Rav is still recording. I don't know if he wants to.
Yeah.